The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in Emily Carter's small apartment. Outside the city was winding down for the evening distant car horns, the faint bark of a dog, the muffled laughter of neighbors she barely knew. She sat at her kitchen table with a half-empty cup of coffee, the bitter taste lingering on her tongue. Her phone buzzed once, a small vibration almost easy to ignore. Almost. She reached for it lazily, expecting a work email or a grocery store promotion. But the name on the screen made her hand freeze mid-air. Nancy Thompson. Nancy had been her father's neighbor for decades, a kind-hearted woman who used to bring over fresh pies in the summer, who knew everyone's business without being cruel about it. In Emily's childhood, Nancy was the kind of person you could trust. The message preview on the screen was short, but it punched the air from Emily's lungs. Emily, your brother Brandon just called me. He said your father is very ill and doesn't have much time left. He wants you to come say goodbye. Emily's hand tightened around the phone. For a moment she didn't move, didn't breathe. The words seemed to hang in the air, heavy and unreal. Her father, Richard Carter. She hadn't seen his face in over 7 years, not since the day he'd looked at her with cold, deliberate disappointment and told her she was no longer welcome on the family ranch. Not since the day he'd sided with Brandon and their mother Linda in that ugly, bitter dispute that had shattered her place in the family forever. Those years in between had been a slow bleed. Silence from them, except for the occasional poisonous rumor that drifted her way, whispers about how Emily had abandoned the family, how she had taken what she wanted and left the rest. Lies crafted carefully by Brandon and Linda until even people who once knew her began to doubt. And now, after all of that, they wanted her to come. Emily's thumb hovered over the keyboard. She could almost hear Nancy's voice in her head, gentle but urgent. But the truth was, the little girl in her who once desperately wanted her father's approval had died a long time ago. She typed a single sentence. I'm sorry, but that part of my life is over. Her finger lingered before hitting send. And when she finally pressed it, she didn't feel relief, only an emptiness that stretched deep. Emily deleted the conversation thread without rereading it. She set the phone face down on the table and stared at the cooling coffee. Outside, the city moved on. Inside, Emily felt the old wound pulse once more, but she knew better than to reopen it. Her brother Brandon, on the other hand, left for the city right after high school. He only returned for holidays, always in a new car with a new watch, a new story about some big deal he was making. Their mother Linda adored him, bragging about his success, while dismissing Emily's work as just ranch chores. It was during a tense summer afternoon that the fracture in the family became permanent. Richard Carter had called a family meeting in the ranch's old dining room. Emily had walked in dusty from fixing a broken water pump in the south pasture and found Brandon and Linda already seated, dressed like they were going to church. Richard slid a document across the table, the deed to the Carter ranch. I've decided, he said, his voice low but firm. The ranch will go to Brandon. He's young, ambitious. He'll take it into the future. Emily froze. You're giving him the ranch. I'm the one who's kept this place running while he's been, selling overpriced condos in the city. Brandon smirked. Come on, Em. You're a vet. You'll be fine. Ranching's not your life. Her father didn't look at her when he replied, Brandon's right. And besides, I don't think you have the fight in you for this kind of responsibility. The room went quiet, except for the faint tick of the grandfather clock. Emily felt something inside her crack. Not just anger, but the deep, hollow ache of realizing her own father had erased her sacrifices. That night, she packed her truck and drove away, leaving behind the only home she had ever known. She told herself she'd never return, and for 7 years she kept that promise. The rain had stopped, but the dirt road to Carter Ranch was slick and uneven. Emily's truck rattled over every pothole, the wipers dragging across the glass like a slow metronome. She had told herself this was just a quick trip in and out. No emotions, no conversations beyond what was absolutely necessary. Yet the closer she got, the more the air seemed to thicken. The ranch house came into view, its white paint peeling the once proud wraparound porch, sagging slightly on one side. Emily Parked sat there for a long moment and watched a lone porch light flicker in the wind. Inside, nothing had changed. The same old photographs hung in the hallway, family portraits, where she stood off to the side, slightly out of frame, while Brandon always claimed the center. Richard was in the kitchen, sitting at the head of the table. His hair was grayer now, his posture more stooped, but the sharpness in his eyes was the same. "Emily," he said, as if her name was a formality, not a welcome. Before she could answer, Brandon strode in from the back door. He was dressed in a tailored coat, boots polished to a mirror shine. That same smug smile from 7 years ago curved across his lips. "Long time no see, sis," he drawled. "Guess you finally decided to stop sulking." Emily forced a calm expression. "Got your message. You said Dad needed me here." Brandon chuckled. "I figured it was time to see if you'd changed your mind about letting bygones be bygones. We've got a deal coming up, big money. Investors from Dallas. If you play along, maybe I'll even cut you in." Richard's gaze flickered, not guilt, not warmth, just calculation. Emily's gut twisted. She'd seen this before. This wasn't about reconciliation. This was bait. And if there was bait, there was a trap. She straightened, her voice steady. "Interesting. But before we talk business, I need to see the ranch ledgers. All of them. Past 7 years." The room went still. Brandon's smile faltered. And in that moment, Emily knew she had just stepped into their game, but she also knew something they didn't. She had come prepared to play. Emily spent the night in the small guest room at the far end of the house, the same one she'd stayed in as a teenager when she was just visiting during summer breaks from college. The wallpaper still had faint water stains, and the old desk by the window smelled faintly of cedar. At 2 a.m., she heard Brandon's truck roar out of the driveway. A perfect opportunity. She slipped on her boots and padded down the hall toward Richard's office. The door was locked, but she had learned years ago that the hinges on the side window could be nudged loose with the flat edge of a pocket knife. Inside, the office felt frozen in time. Heavy oak desk, leather-bound ledgers stacked neatly, and an antique clock ticking softly in the corner. She turned on the desk lamp, careful to keep the blinds closed. The ledgers weren't just numbers, they were a history. Year by year, she traced the entries: cattle sales feed expenses, land tax payments. All neat until 2020. Then came the irregularities. Huge sums labeled equipment upgrades. Yet Emily hadn't seen any new machinery on the property. Payments to companies she didn't recognize, all with P.O. boxes in Dallas. And then one name kept reappearing: Crown Mesa Holdings, LLC. Her pulse quickened. That wasn't a ranch supply company, it was a shell corporation. She'd seen it before in an old oil rights dispute she'd researched for a client years back. Emily snapped photos of every suspicious page with her phone, careful to put the ledgers back exactly as she'd found them. As she turned to leave, she noticed a single manila folder tucked behind the bottom drawer. Inside was a photocopy of a deed transfer dated 3 weeks ago. It wasn't to an investor from Dallas. It was to Brandon himself. The ranch wasn't just in his name now. He had leveraged half the land as collateral for a private loan from Crown Mesa. If he defaulted, they'd own it outright. Emily's hand tightened around the folder. This wasn't just greed. It was recklessness. And if she played it right, it was also his undoing. By sunrise, Emily had already brewed her first cup of coffee and made 2 calls, one to a trusted contact in Austin who specialized in corporate records, and another to a former ranch hand who owed her a favor. She didn't mention Brandon's name. Not yet. Her contact Lyle called back before breakfast. "Crown Mesa Holdings, LLC. Yeah, I know 'em. Front for a bigger investment group. They buy distressed land cheap, then flip it to developers. You're telling me they're sniffing around your ranch?" Emily smiled into her mug. "Not mine, but soon to be if they play it right." "Watch yourself," Lyle warned. "They're the type who'll shake hands with you while they're already counting your dirt." That was exactly what she needed: someone greedier than Brandon. Later that afternoon, Emily drove into town and parked outside a faded law office. Inside, the air smelled of paper and stale coffee. She handed the secretary a sealed envelope. "Please have this delivered to Mr. Cole Barrett at Crown Mesa Holdings. It's a business proposal. He'll want to read it." Inside that envelope was a summary of the ranch's current debts, hints about Brandon's unreported financial activities, and a suggestion that certain assets could be acquired at a steep discount if one knew where to look. She didn't sign her name. Instead, she used the alias Margaret Dean, a concerned partner with inside knowledge. By the time she returned to the ranch, Brandon was on the porch phone in hand, voice tense. "You been talking to anyone in town?" he demanded. Emily tilted her head. "Why you losing sleep over something?" His jaw flexed. "Just stay out of business you don't understand." She walked past him without answering, hiding her satisfaction. Brandon had no idea the wolves were already circling, and Emily had just painted him in blood. 2 days later, a sleek black SUV pulled up the ranch's long gravel drive. The kind of vehicle you didn't see unless money or trouble was involved. Emily watched from the barn doorway as two men stepped out. Both wore tailored suits and boots that had never seen dirt. One of them, tall and sharp-eyed, introduced himself as Cole Barrett from Crown Mesa Holdings. "We're here to speak with Brandon Steele Cole," said his voice, calm but carrying the weight of someone used to making people listen. Emily didn't offer to call Brandon. She simply nodded toward the house. "He's inside. Kitchen." From her vantage point near the barn window, Emily saw the meeting unfold. Brandon welcomed them in with forced confidence, offering coffee like he was in control. But Cole leaned forward, speaking low and quick, sliding a folder across the table. Brandon's eyes narrowed. He flipped through the papers, debt statements, liens, and something that made his hand pause. His voice rose, defensive. "This is all exaggerated. Some of it's flat-out lies." Cole didn't blink. "Lies? Or not? It's what's circulating in certain circles. We're in a position to help buy out some of your holdings before the bank takes them." Quietly. Brandon tried to play it cool, but the twitch in his jaw told Emily he was rattled. The meeting lasted 40 minutes. When Cole and his partner left, Brandon followed them to the SUV, lowering his voice. Emily couldn't hear the words, but she could read the body language, bargaining, hesitating, then finally nodding. She slipped back into the barn before he could see her. By nightfall, Brandon was on the phone again, pacing the porch. "She's not part of this. She's just the vet," he said, the same dismissive tone he'd used years ago when he stole her credit for saving the herd during the blizzard. Emily smiled in the dark. The more Brandon underestimated her, the easier it would be to make him step right into her next trap. That night, the August air was thick with the smell of dry mesquite. The house was quiet except for the low murmur of Brandon's voice on the porch. Emily had finished checking the foaling stalls, but instead of heading to bed, she looped around the side of the house. She crouched beneath the open kitchen window, the same one Brandon always cracked to smoke when he thought no one was watching. The screen was loose, the perfect gap for sound to slip through. "I told you, Cole, no paper trail until after the transfer." Brandon said, his words clipped. "And that land, it's not technically mine yet. Just in transition. The old man's estate is still sorting it out." A pause. Then Cole's voice, firm and measured. "That's risky. Crown Mesa doesn't invest in question marks. We want clear title, and we want the water rights too. Your signature on both, or there's no deal." Emily's pulse kicked up. Water rights. In this part of the county, they were worth more than gold. Brandon laughed lightly, the kind of fake charm she'd heard him use on bank reps and women alike. "Relax. The vet won't contest anything. She's too busy mucking stalls to